This is Ike. You may have heard of him. I hear people like him. Who am I kidding? Ike is one of the most beloved Fire Emblem characters to date. As a Fire Emblem protagonist, he sets himself apart in various ways. He is not of noble birth, which is refreshing when majority of the lords are. Another reason Ike stands out is his autism. Yes, you heard me right. His way of thinking and his worldview is very different from his peers, and he's exactly the sort of person Tellius needs. To give you a short, yet exhaustive list of Ike's neurodivergent traits, Ike does not understand social cues, etiquette, and hierarchies. He's always honest and direct when he speaks, and never sugarcoats anything. He's incapable of lying. He is unabashedly sincere in everything he does. He has a really strong sense of justice. He often takes what people say literally or at face value. He rarely does any facial expressions and often has a resting bitch face. His safe food is meat. He doesn't really eat much else. He has audio processing issues and has a hard time taking multiple verbal instructions. He's impulsive and often says and does things without thinking. He struggles with planning and organizing, delegating it to other people in the company. He's deeply empathetic and will accommodate other people when he can. He's allergic to inauthenticity and people being fake. He often doesn't get jokes, make jokes, or laugh when people expect him to. He often gets into trouble with authority because he treats everyone the same. He needs to understand why something is done or why something works before he's on board with it. Just to mention a few. And now, I'll spend the rest of the video talking about more specific examples. But before that, I believe introductions are in order. Hello, my name is Spacelord, and welcome! This is the second video in my series of talking about neurodivergence in my favorite games. Last time I talked about Yumiya Liesfeld from Atelier Yumiya. My goal was to analyze her character and explain her personality traits through ADHD, using my own experiences as an ADHD person. If that sounds interesting to you, there'll be a link in the corner and description. Growing up, I loved playing Fire Emblem Path of Radiance. It was my entry into the Fire Emblem franchise, and as an 11-year-old with too much time to spare, I became absolutely obsessed. Since then, I've played the game at least a dozen times. Maybe more. Probably more. Of course, the story, gameplay, and presentation were all enticing on their own, but there was something else that made the game very special. Ike is a straightforward guy who says what he thinks. It was extremely refreshing to me when society at the time, and especially today, feels so filled to the brim with social rules, norms, and frankly, hints people are just expecting you to pick up on. Instead of doing all that, Ike is just honest and direct. It gets him into plenty of trouble along the way, and this is something I could definitely relate to. Blunt, direct communication is something most people aren't comfortable with after all. Back when I played Path of Radiance, Ike resonated with me in ways I couldn't put into words, or heck, even understand or express. Until now, that is. Fast forward from 2005 to 2025, and now I have an ADHD diagnosis under my belt. I finally understood why Ike felt so deeply relatable to me. Knowing what I know now, I can clearly see the neurodivergent traits in him. So, strap in folks, it's probably gonna be a long one. Also, spoilers for Fire Emblem Path of Radiance, and Engage. He is really well represented in Engage, and I will be taking advantage of that. The thing Ike is most known for is his honest and straightforward approach to communication. At least I think it's one of the most, if not the most, defining character trait. And it's often the topic of discussion regarding Ike, for better and for worse. As a neurodivergent person, I always appreciated how blunt he is. But I think to some people, he comes off as unintentionally funny, when he's not trying to be. Whether that be characters Ike interacts with, or how he's perceived by people playing the game, or in online spaces. Ike majority of the time, doesn't abide by the social rules and norms that society has set up and expect him to follow. It leads to a lot of social missteps, so to speak, because he doesn't have a good grasp of people's expectations.
Feels like I bulked up a ton after all the fights we've been through. What do you think?
If you did, I haven't noticed. Sorry.
No, don't apologize. I really like your bluntness.
Well, my friends keep telling me I should be more considerate. Glad it's not a problem. Stop me if I'm out of line, but you seem to be taking too much responsibility on yourself.
You're quite direct, aren't you? It's oddly comforting, I must admit.
I feel at ease around you, Sir Ike. I'm not entirely sure why.
I guess we both prefer to skip idle chatter. Except for right now, that is.
Know what I admire about you, Ike? You're the same way with everyone. You never pretend.
Nice way to say I've got no manners. I was never any good at that sort of thing.
It's especially noticeable when Ike interacts with people of nobility, authority, or a higher station. You see, Ike doesn't really understand this whole social hierarchy thing, so he treats everyone with the same amount of respect. In Chapter 12, when the party ship gets stuck, Ike immediately goes to shore to look for help. He is blissfully unaware that's illegal, and is intercepted by patrolling Goldoans. They exchange words, and it doesn't take long before Ike gets rightfully upset. Before the situation can escalate any further, Kurthnaga, the Goldoan prince, fortunately intervenes. Ike appreciates the intervention, but only because it expedites the process of the ship getting unstuck. He explains the situation plainly and directly asks for assistance, and this takes Kurthnaga aback. It's a bit of a shock to the system. The polite and respectful manners he's used to is nowhere to be found. Ike being Ike just speaks to Kurthnaga like he would to any other person. This time it doesn't get him into any hot water or consequences, as providing assistance with the ship is more important. However, it does a good job of planting the idea that there could be conflict between Ike and other nobles in future chapters. It's when the party arrives in Bengnion that things start to really get spicy. Ike is like a fish out of water, and is extremely confused and frustrated by the local social rules and customs. Fast forward to chapter 14, where Sanaki grants an audience with Ike and Elincia. She and the Senate, being cautious, want to confirm if Elincia's claims are true, if she truly is the Princess of Crimea, which seems reasonable enough at first. They cannot provide aid in Crimea's restoration if Elincia isn't the princess. To Ike, this is sheer lunacy. He knows that Elincia is the real deal, and doesn't see the point of going through with this procedure. She didn't travel this far just for show. When Sanaki eventually reveals that she already knew Elincia's identity beforehand, and was simply playing a game of wits and words as a test, Ike justifiably blows up at her. This has nothing to do with social stations. What Sanaki just did was horrendous and extremely insensitive to Elincia. As Ike says, she's been through so much, finally got to Sanaki's doorstep, and she's ridiculed. This moment is a wonderful showcase of Ike's deep empathy, but also his strong sense of justice. The other people in the room indulge Sanaki, but not Ike. Elincia has been wronged, and he will not let it stand. His emotions run high, and I think this is the most emotional Ike ever gets. What he doesn't realize, however, is that this act of compassion could have had him executed if it wasn't for Sanaki's patience. Elincia, of course, appreciates the gesture, but Ike's communication style and lack of social etiquette could have had truly dire consequences. It's simply not appreciated in this kind of environment. In a support conversation, Ronald remarks that Ike is the craziest person he has ever worked for. Not crazy as in insane, but Ike's leadership is just that different from other generals. And again, it's because Ike is sincere, straightforward, and treats everyone the same. But more importantly, he never compromises who he is. And I think it's so great that Ike never feels the need to mask or pretend. He's always himself regardless of who he's talking to.
The way you're built, you must have been quite the fighter in your day.
I have trained hard to stay in shape during my years of service to Queen Lumera, and I'll be long retired before I begin lagging behind you youngsters.
I'm not a youngster. Oh, wait, I understand. Still, if we get the chance, I'd like to spar.
Throughout the game, Ike will often take things at face value or take things literally. He expects other people to say what they think, since that's what he does. In reality, people frequently speak with implied meanings and it goes over his head. Like when he's talking to Gatry in chapter 14. He's taken in the view of the flowers, which Ike takes at face value and begins discussing the nearby flora. Gatry, of course, was talking about the flowers in a metaphorical sense, and was actually referring to the handmaidens tending to the garden. Ike does not understand what Gatry could possibly see in these women, and exits stage left while the armored man rambles. He responds with saying Ike is just a boy and will get it when he's older, but there's definitely more at play here. The inauthentic way Gatry goes about women really rubs Ike the wrong way. Approaching women with presumably solely romantic intent doesn't sit right with him. Ike doesn't really tolerate people being shallow in this way, and I think it's deeply upsetting for him. There's also the interpretation that Ike is queer, but that's not really in the scope of this video. I do believe it though. My personal interpretation is a romantic asexual.
It must be difficult for you to spend so much time around me and not develop feelings.
I don't know what to say to that. You have earned my trust though, Goldmary. I guess trust is a feeling.
I knew it. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Ike, your strength is like a fine cut of meat. I just wish I could eat it to absorb your qualities.
I can't tell if that's a compliment or a joke.
Once the Grill mercenaries reach Dane, winter has already overtaken the country in a blanket of snow. During a base conversation in chapter 19, Janaf remarks how his wings might freeze over by the time the army finishes battle preparations. Ike, being Ike, is of course concerned for his allies' well-being, and asks if that can truly happen. No, that was just a joke. Once he realizes, he apologizes for not laughing, which there's no need for, but he didn't meet Janav's expectations, so he feels like he has to apologize. He then continues to say how he'd love to shove the younger generation of Hawks back into their eggs to start from scratch. Ike is taken aback by this information. Unsure if it was a joke or not, he has to confirm if Hawks do, in fact, hatch from eggs. No, of course not. It's just a joke.
They say that a good smile is contagious, you know. You should try smiling more often.
Okay, I'll try that sometime.
If you've been paying attention, you may have picked up on the fact that Ike doesn't emote very much, if at all. The only time we see Ike truly express emotions is when he's angry or deeply concerned for someone else. Like the Sonic situation we talked about earlier. He's not the type to crack jokes either, and when other people do, it's rare for him to laugh. I think the only time I remember seeing Ike genuinely laugh is during his sea support with Ranulf. Ranulf calls himself a fish out of water as a metaphor, and it really tickled Ike's funny bone. So there's the occasional smile during conversation, but other than that, Ike's mostly stoic, which can make it hard for people around him to tell how he's actually feeling.
Lord Ike, do you mind me tagging along with you so much?
I like it, actually. It reminds me of when I used to hang out with a band of mercenaries.
Whew, I was worried. It's just, you hardly ever smile, you know?
Sorry to worry you. My friends used to tell me my social skills needed some work.
For example, during a base conversation with Soth in chapter 12. Ike is wearing his default expression like usual, and Soth gets the impression that he's angry. Which isn't at all the case, as Nasir helpfully points out. Of course, it doesn't help that Ike was violent with Soth to get him to talk moments prior. A similar thing happens in the base conversation in Bengnion, where a handmaiden approaches Ike. Her desire to gossip is clear as day, and she starts prattling on like it's nobody's business. Ike does not indulge her whatsoever, as he strongly dislikes gossip. A nearby coworker comes along and informs her that Ike is a Linces retainer, and in fact, not someone who works at the temple. She apologizes profusely. Ike leaves, and she thinks he's angry because of his expression. Which is probably half true. He wouldn't appreciate anyone who uses slurs. I already talked about Ike's strong sense of justice previously, but I want to provide more examples. In chapter 11, before the party boards the ship, Ranulf gets ganged upon by the civilians for simply existing. Mordecai urges Ike to book it to the ship while everyone's distracted, but there's no way he can leave Ranulf behind like this. He doesn't care how he gets perceived for stepping in, he just wants to save his friend. In Chapter 20, General Shiharam is forced to open the floodgates until either side is defeated. As the battle is waging, the countryside and its citizens are slowly being drowned. After the battle, the party assesses the damage and it's devastating. Ike decides he wants to help the citizens of Telrega by giving away some of the army's supplies. He admits he is unable to do nothing when presented with such injustice. The Crimean army is partly responsible, so it's only right. We've already established that Ike clashes with authority to some extent because of who he is, but it happens in more subtle ways as well. Early on, when Grail is slowly giving Ike more and more commander responsibilities, he has a hard time understanding why. The others assure him it's because he's going to take over the company one day, and that now is as good a time as any to start teaching him the ropes. It's something Ike is never truly able to accept and perhaps even understand. In Chapter 7, while walking and talking with Grail, Ike brings up leadership as a topic. Grail wonders if Ike has a problem with authority, and that might be how he comes off. Ike simply wants to understand why, but asking questions like these is often seen as talking back or confrontational, which is usually very unpopular in the workplace and quickly gets you fired. If Ike doesn't understand why something works or why something needs to be done, he can't accept it. And a lot of neurodivergent people think the same way. I know I do. It takes Ike a long time to get accustomed to the responsibilities of being a commander. When Titania gives him the rundown, it's so much information he cannot keep up. It's overwhelming, and he requests Titania to slow down. Information being only given verbally doesn't work for Ike. He needs to be shown what to do visually with guidance, if possible. And ultimately, Soren and Titania are the ones who end up handling the smaller details in the company. All the planning, organizing, and financing fall to them. Ike just has to lead, fight, and check up on his allies. He can do that. As the story arc in Benyan wraps up, Ike is forced into the position of Lord in order to be a general of the Crimean army. He despises the idea, but Sanaki cannot appoint him general because of his commoner status. He even wonders if he has to put on a funny hat, because that's his current perception of what a noble is. He only has the Benyan Senate as reference after all. Ike has finally gotten the hang of being a commander, and now he's going to get even more responsibilities? Truly the worst nightmare possible. Although, even with the promotion, things stay relatively the same. Sure, he has more people to order around, but he delegates what he can to other people. When asked what orders he wants to give Tanith's troops, he simply says they follow her orders. He doesn't see the need to involve himself. A good portion of the enemy commanders also wonder if Ike is brave or just stupid, because his tactics are always really simple and straightforward. Ralph even pokes fun at Ike for it in Chapter 25. At the very end of the game, Ike declines becoming a noble for his war efforts as he's more than content with his simple life as a mercenary. Of course he doesn't want to deal with how the royal court operates, he has made his stance evident. Having to live a life where he's being constantly berated for who he is? No thanks. Like I said earlier, Ike is sincere in everything he does, and that is reflected in how he views the world. He has a hard time understanding how the Crimeans can be openly racist when Gallia and Crimea are allied nations. Ike doesn't think that Luxembourg are that different, but the mutual alliance is only between the royal families and the citizenry aren't really affected. In Chapter 12, Nasir describes Ike as simple and pure, an honest man. That while they are good traits to have, Ike's beliefs will be tested time and time again as the journey progresses. It's really apt that Nasir is the one to say this, considering his betrayal in Chapter 21. In Ronald and Ike's aid support, he gets called outright stupid, gullible. Because Ike is always so sincere and easily trusts people, it's gonna bite him someday. But on the flip side, it's this exact nature that enables Ike to get so far. Even the Black Knight remarks how there's something about Ike that draws people to him. He was able to forge such strong bonds with a variety of people from different stations and races all over the world, simply because he was himself and no one else. In a shallow world filled with corruption and cruelty, Ike is the perfect person for this story. He doesn't judge people for who they are, he meets them at where they're at. Attitude and actions speak much louder than words for Ike, and that's what he uses as a guide. In his ace report with Soren, it's revealed that Soren is branded. His parents were Bjork and Laguz. And because people have shunned him for as long as he can remember, he is deathly afraid of Ike doing the same. The Grail Mercenaries is the only place he's ever called home. But no, Ike doesn't really care. Why would this new info change anything? The time they've spent together doesn't vanish just because Soren is branded. As far as Ike is concerned, Soren is still Soren. One of his closest, if not the closest companion he has. And companionship aside, Ike relies heavily on Soren to accommodate planning, organizing, and battle tactics. The company would be in shambles without him. Ike echoes similar sentiments to Morim during a base conversation in chapter 16. Morim states that the reason he's so familiar with the customs of Begnian nobles is because he used to be a slave. He believes that if he sticks around, Tormod, Ike, and everyone else will be scorned for allowing a former slave like him to be part of the company. Ike is just puzzled by the whole thing, wondering why Morim is doing all this. He doesn't understand the Begnian class system. Living in a society where your worth is decided upon birth is not something he can get behind. He can't deny that royalty is royalty because they're born into it, but it's never treated noble any different just because of that. Morim envies Ike coming from a country with a more lenient social structure, but it's more about how Ike was brought up. He was born in Gallia, where he had a wonderful, supporting family. If you treat others in good faith, they will follow you out of their own volition. It's something Grail once taught Ike, and that influence is very apparent. I know for a fact there's more things to discuss. Path of Radiance is such a dense game after all. However, I think I've said my piece. I discussed what I wanted to. I believe Ike is some of the best autistic representation we have in video games. And his neurodivergence isn't something that's shunned or berated. He's never told to stop being himself. He's able to achieve so much, not in spite of it, but because of it. As a late diagnosed autistic ADHD person, I can't help but feel reassured that everything is going to be fine. That being yourself is totally okay. You don't have to pretend to accommodate or appease others. That you will find people who will appreciate you and not push you away. That you will find success because of who you are. So, hopefully I was able to express why Ike is so special to me, and why I think he's autistic. He is one of my favorite characters in fiction, and I'm so glad I could finally talk about him at length. That being said, thanks for watching. I have nothing to plug aside my last video on Yumia, so go watch it.